Okay, so now that we got our base grains over here, now what we're going to do is we're going to focus on these nuts over here. So these come in two stages. The first stage is by warping our shapes over here around these nuts. That's the first one that we're going to do. And the second stage is that we are going to actually create like these little knobs or nuts or whatever they're called. So we need to get started by just deciding where we actually are going to place those. For this, if we go to patterns, we will go ahead and use a simple tile generator once again over here. And this time, so this tile generator can be very basic. We are gonna go ahead and set this pattern to be a disk over here. See? So that's quite easy. Now you can kind of decide how many you want. I don't want to have too many of them. So maybe 10 by 10 is actually fine. We'll see. Because what we're going to do is we're gonna scroll down and at the scale set these a lot smaller. And then also do like a scale random, like this, so that they become even smaller. Don't do too much actually. And then if you also go ahead and set the random over here, what it should do. Oh no, wait, sorry. For that we first need to like also do some scaling like this. But what we can also do is you can also scale them a little bit flatter like this. Although you need to set the interstice, I hope I said it correctly, up a little bit before we can actually do like the random stuff. But now we have over here, as you can see, so we have some very small scale variation. Now if we just go into the position random, we can just go ahead and we can give it like a random position. If you want a random rotation. And the goal for this is that now we can go all the way down here to the color. And then we have a random mask. The nice thing about this random mask is that when you move it up, you can see that we can basically choose how many of these pieces we want to have. So just like that, we can easily just move around with this to change our random mask. So let's say 0.75 to get started. And now let's say that I don't really like the position because right now it is all in this location. Now we can go ahead and we can set the position here or do like even a global offset. Or what you can try to do is go all the way up to your random seed. And this will just generate a random seed based upon your parameters. And for example, if I set this to number 3, that looks pretty cool. Okay, so we now got these pieces over here. Now what we're going to do with these pieces is that I want to split them up. So let's go ahead and basically we need to turn this into like some noise. So if we go in here and add a directional blur, we're going to make this a little bit wider. So I'm adding like a directional blur over here, as you can see. And that will just make everything like a little bit wider, so it will just cover a larger surface area. Then if I go ahead and maybe add, what if I then add a blur high quality grayscale to make it like a little bit thicker so that we get something like this. So we get like these really white looking pieces over here. And now what we're going to do is we're basically just going to generate once again like a gradient map. So if we for example have this gradient map, what would happen is it should, here see, so it will generate some of these pieces. Now of course this kind of like needs to fit in properly. So if we blend this one together, actually blend this on the top, and blend this together using our original directional warp over here. Let's have a look. So here if we set this to maybe like art, here you can see that now we start to get like that warping. So right now the blending mode is set to art. You can use your scroll wheel to actually scroll through them to see if there's maybe something that blends a little bit better. For example, like soft light or max lighten, no, and then there's sometimes also like a soft light all the way at the bottom. That also sometimes works, but no, it looks like that we want to go for art. Okay, so if I go for art, I actually want to have a check because normally I do this separately, but if I have a look at this, it feels like that we don't actually have to do this separately. So that's pretty cool if we can save that little step. So we have this one over here, okay. Well, yeah, we do have like some really strong pieces, but that's okay. So I'm going to set my directional blur even higher because I want to see if I can... Well, I don't want to set it that high. That's a tricky one. Like, I want to set it higher, but I don't want to get like... Here, I want to just have like a round effect. I feel like that looks pretty good. So here it nicely goes around it. So if I have a look at this, it looks like that... Oh, no, wait, that's why I'm adding it always later on. Because we are overlaying this to this piece. And what might happen is when you overlay it like that, is that it will not show up. So that's why I tend to do the blend after it. We can give this a go, however. We can see if it... Here, see, so then we do miss some of these locations where they are placed, as you can see. So that is a tricky one. I'm not sure... Yeah, I think we'll just go like the traditional way that I always do. So the traditional way is something like this. It's a little bit more messy, but it's basically like a blend behind it. We then throw in our gradient map into the top and just add a grayscale conversion to convert it. And then once we've done that, we can go ahead and we just need to create like another mask. And that's basically going to be it. So for this mask, I want to go ahead and I want to grab... probably like this one, add a histogram scan to this blur to basically push it out as far as I can, like that. And then we kind of like need to add another blur, high quality grayscale, on top of that, which will kind of like just blend everything out. And doing that, here you can see that now if we play around with that blur, we can sort of like make them fade in and out. Don't go too much, because if you go too much, you can see that it starts to show through. So just sit like this level. And at the point that when we're actually done with this, it will be so noisy that it will all just fit together. So that's like one way to like add that extra warping on top of that. If you want, you can go ahead and also use this one over here. So using this one over here, I think that does give a nice effect, because it kind of like continues the warping. And then what we will do is we will add the warping later on top, just for these areas over here. So that's a new technique. I will use this technique from now on. You cannot really see it that often, but it does give like a nice effect. Okay, so we got this over here. So now we have like a pretty solid base. Now later on we are going to actually add our little knobs, which they need to be over here. So... actually, we could probably add those now. Let's add a blend. And let's just go ahead and grab the very original one over here. And throw this at the very top. And set this to be subtract. So here will be our little knots and everything like that. Now, they are not too special, the knots. As you can see over here, they kind of like just lay on the top. Most of it comes from the color. And yes, there are like some, over here, like some cuts in here. So what I'm going to do... is I'm going to, I am improvising right now, so, well, I've been improvising this entire time, but I mean, I'm not working from memory anymore. So if we have these, it would maybe be nice if we just like add some cuts to these pieces already in here. There's a few ways that we can do this. The first way is that we can go ahead and we can go into our patterns and grab a shape pattern over here. And with the shape pattern, if you set this to be a disk, you just have a normal disk. Now, as you can see here, the cuts, they kind of like just go from the center and they kind of like go out. There is actually a node that we can use for this, and it's called like a star node or star burst node, I believe it is called. No, not a star burst. Well, maybe it is a star burst. Or like a polygon. No, I think it is a starburst node. So the starburst node, what we can do is we can blend our shape using this. And just set the mode to be like subtract so that it's actually cutting out. And then in our actual starburst, you can go ahead and you can say like, okay, how many edges, for example, do you want? Then we have like the blur amount, which can make it a bit sharper. Size minimum and the size maximum. It's always nice to just give it like a little bit more variation, including with like the size variation. Then you can see that we start to get a little bit more of like that cut look, as you can see. Randomness, you can also add, so that will just add some randomness. And with this one, if we now just add a very quick, and it's a node, I don't think I've covered it yet, it's the multi-directional warp grayscale. It's quite a name, but this node, you will love this node. It's one of my favorites. If you go to your noises and you plug in a noise here, it will basically warp along this noise. So if we go for like our clouds 2 is the one that I tend to use, and plug it into the intensity. Now if you set the mode to minimum and the direction is to 1, it will basically just like kind of move your stars around. See? Like this. Now maybe the Clouds 2 does not work in this specific case. We can also try like a purling noise just to see if that works, and if we just make it a bit smaller, because we just want to get like some general warping in here. Something like this will like look quite nice. So let's do like a purling noise, and then we are basically warping this together over here. And now it's just a matter of maybe like going in here and maybe like setting our size minimum and our size maximum out a little bit more in order to fit it. But that's basically how we can just very quickly add some of these pieces. Now, if you go ahead and, for example, now duplicate this, you can also go ahead and duplicate your starburst and your directional warp. And just for this one, I'm only going to give it like 2 variations. I'm just going to set my randomness different and maybe like set my branches a little bit like less, maybe like 4 or something like that. And then add this one to the top. So now we have like these 2 different variations. So in your tile generator input, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and you want to set this pattern to be an image input. And set the pattern image input number to 2. This way we can simply plug in over here 2 images, as you can see. Which will give us like this little knob over here. Which can then later on also be added in here. But we'll work on that a little bit later on. So we got these pieces right now. That's pretty good. I just need to make sure that when I blur it. There we go. So that's still, so that it does not interfere with our blurring or anything like that. But that looks totally fine. And now for this one. What I'm going to do is, so let's see. It does have like a little ring around it. But for the rest it's pretty much on like the flat area over here. So what I might do is I might simply do this into the color. And for now, so right now we have it set to be a darkening input. But if we go ahead and actually use this one, this tile generator as a mask, by plugging it into our opacity, we can most likely just use like a uniform color. And a uniform color is just like a flat color at the top. Oh, and set the blending mode to copy. And then with our uniform color, I can basically like kind of match this out. So we need to be a little bit careful that we do not go too over the top, because then we will be able to actually see it. In our high poly, we will be able to see it moving around. And we don't really want it. So let's just set it to roughly like quite a white color. Maybe just like do a simple 0. A little bit darker. Let's do 0.4 over here, so that they will just be overlaying on top of it like this. I guess on top of this, what we can do is we can do slope blur grayscale. So adding a slope blur grayscale can break up our edges. I don't know, have I done that before? Oh no, I've not done that before. So a slope blur grayscale is also a node you will really love. So with this one, if you for example grab like a Clouds 2 and plug it in here, what it will do is if you set your samples up, your mode to minimum and your intensity down, you can see that it will break up your shape. See? The mode basically just says blur, means that it goes on both sides. Minimum just means that it will ignore everything that is black. And maximum means that it will ignore everything that is white. So just keep that in mind. And then what we can do is we can just give it like some small, like 0.1. It's very sensitive. But give it like some small variations like this. Which will in turn just make everything feel a little bit more organic and a little bit more realistic. Because it's no longer perfectly round. So yeah, you can basically just like mess around with the intensity, maybe like 0.12 for example, and just get something that looks quite nice out of this. Okay, so that is pretty good. At this point, what we're going to do is we're just going to add some general noise. Let's do like a multi-directional warp grayscale. And I don't know if I want to go for like a Clouds 2 noise, which by the way I just used. Or if I want to go for a really small purling noise by setting the scale of my purling down. So let's see, we have this one. Now you can see that this looks very, very noisy, but if we set the mode to minimum and just set the angles down, maybe set the direction to like 1. It's just about like adding some general waviness to our shape. So we have this one, or we have our Yeah, I think I like the clouds 2 more in this case. So we can, using this and just move your warp angle down, you can see over here that we can just add like some very small waviness and just add some imperfections to our shape. See? And I think that will look quite nice, and it feels once again more organic, because right now everything is just way too perfect. So let's do something like this. You can try and play around with like multiple directions, but often one direction is fine. Now doing it this way, I do find that it has a different look compared to like the directional warp, and that's why I'm using the multi-directional warp. It seems to just work a little bit better than like a directional warp or like a normal warp. I know a lot of pieces are called warp. So we got this one over here. That is all looking pretty good. Now what we're going to do now is we are going to slowly just start adding like a bunch of extra pieces. So we have like some stronger streaks. Let's do those first. So we got this one. Let's add a blend. And for our stronger streaks, I'm going to go in and let's just use an anastrophic noise. And anastrophic noise just has like all of these really long streaks. And we can basically set the Y amount by resolution, which will make them a lot thinner. And the X amount is basically going to be like how many of these or how long the lines are. So I'm going to set this to probably like 3. Not too long, not too small. Yeah, okay, that looks pretty good. So now that we have this, we are going to start with the histogram scan. Come on, histogram scan. And this one can just basically push out and just give me a few lines, as you can see over here. So having these few lines, I'm now going to do a multi-directional warp grayscale. Or maybe like a normal warp. Let's try them both out just to see which one works best. And we are going to warp this once again using our very original... Actually, let's use this one. Our very original noise. Okay, so this one does push it around quite well. But we don't want to push it as much. And this one, if we set the U to minimum in a direction of 1 and down... I'm gonna go for the multi-directional warp, as always. So as you can see over here, I'm just warping this a little bit in the direction of how everything looks, just to make everything feel a little bit more interesting. But I'm not doing it too much. I then add another multi-directional warp, and this one will be more for like a random noise. So if we just set the mode to minimum, directions to 1, I'm going to use, for example, let's start with just trying like a clouds 2. Clouds 2 is pretty good, but I think I want to have something a bit bigger, maybe like a Berlin noise. Honestly, I kind of want to have both of them. Let's duplicate our multi-direction warp. Wow, I don't often have so many in a row. So number 3. And number 3, I want to just here add like some of this noise. Like that. That looks pretty good. And now just to kind of like break it up. I think at this point it might actually be nice if I just add like some cleanup. So let's just do that first. So here, cleanup, if you just select your nodes that you want to have organized, you can right click and you can press add frame. This is quite nice because you can give the frame a name, so we can say nodes. Then we can go ahead and go in here. And we can say, over here we can say like frame, and this will be grain generation. And then over here this will just be like the combining that we will have. Grain and nodes combine. There we go, and then we kind of like move it from there. And then this one will become strong cuts, for example, something like that, for example. Okay, so we have a multi-direction warp. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and blend it using a grunge map. And this will just kind of make sure that it's not all over the place, that it's, yeah, like a little bit less. For our grunge map, I'm going to want something a bit more directional. So didn't we use... Oh, but we used the contrast a lot. What we can try to do. So if this is the effect that we need to get just to save some space or to save some memory, because you can see that these are very expensive. The way that milliseconds works is whenever you change something in your graph, it needs to run through all of these nodes. All of these nodes add a few milliseconds to generate it, so you want to try and keep your milliseconds down. 92 is quite expensive. These crunches are always quite expensive, so that's why I'm trying to always keep everything into the green. One way that we can do this, to get this effect, is we can go ahead and grab this crunch map and set the balance back to like something like this, so a little bit less. And then add a histogram scan, which will sort of do like the same thing. And use that to kind of like push the balance back in. So I'm just now trying to get... Here, it's not completely the same. So if we now go in here and maybe like set our contrast down a little bit, because I need to get it very similar. There we go, see? So it looks very similar now. Maybe like tone down the position a little bit. Over here. So the reason I'm doing this is because I can now just plug this one in here. So that should not have changed anything, really. It has created one thick line, of course. See how small changes can even make a big difference? You can go ahead and go into like your position. And contrast and just try to like get it a little bit better. That's annoying that we have that exact one line. Is that one in here? It is. Can I maybe just like add then some extra... Oh yeah, here, see, I just need to add like some extra grains. It just happens to have pushed out exactly that last little bit of grayscale. So over here, I'm just adding like a few extra grains. And the reason that I'm doing all of this is because now, this one we can throw away, but this one I can now use. So I can now add the transform 2D to this. And rotate it 90 degrees. And this just that it is going along with our grains. And then I can throw this in here. I can add a histogram scan on top of this. Set the position up. Throw this into the top. And then finally set this to be a subtract. And now what you can see is now with this simple slider, we can control how much or how little of our grains we actually want to have showing up. That's it. We can now go ahead and we can plug this here into the top. Set the mode to be subtract because we want to have it going down. And now you can see that we got like these stronger lines. And we can take it from here. So we can go ahead and we can, like in our anastrophic noise, if you want, you can set the wire mount by resolution off. And then you can like mess around with, over here, like set it to like 1024 to basically give it like more thickness and all that kind of stuff. Length, you can also go ahead and set the length to, for example, 2 to give it like longer lengths and just to make it run across and all that kind of fancy stuff to just get it all looking perfect. For now, I'm going to leave it off here. I'm going to save my scene. And what we will be doing in the next chapter is we will just be probably completing actually. Yeah, we will probably be completing like our main grains and actually preview them inside of Marmoset. But this is already starting to look quite well. I'm going to end up with just doing, if it allows me to. Come on. There we go. Gonna start by end up doing this. And that's about it. So let's continue to the next chapter.